welcome back to another classics I've always wanted to read video. This time I'm going to be reading a book that has been on my reading list for the longest, and that is Don Quixote by Cervantes. This is a book about a guy named Don Quixote who has become so entranced by reading romances of chivalry that he determines to become a knight-errant and pursue bold adventures accompanied by his squire, the cunning Sancho Panza. I am honestly very intimidated by this book. First of all, this is a thick boy and the text is quite small, but the main reason why I'm intimidated by this book is because I tried reading it a little bit last year, and I had the book on my iPad then, so maybe the translator didn't do a very good job there, but it was just very hard to read, and it contained so many Old English words, so it was very hard to understand what was going on. But I hope that this one will be better, that the translator has actually written this in English, and yeah, I'll just do my best, I guess. Miguel de Cervantes was a Spanish writer born in 1547 near Madrid to a poor family of 7 children. He was an avid reader as a child, and reading was taught to him by a relative, but it's unknown if he had any further education. Cervantes published his first poetry writing in 1569, and the year after that, 1570, he became a soldier, and then in 1575 he was captured by the Turks while he was trying to return back to Spain from Italy with his brother, and then he spent 5 years in prison until in 1580 he could finally return home. In 1585 he published his first novel, which was La Galatea, and also multiple plays, but he didn't achieve literary success until his later years by publishing the first part of Don Quixote in 1605, and Don Quixote was the first modern novel, and Cervantes also published a second part to the first book, which came out in 1615. And then he continued writing until he died in 1660. Freedom, Sancho, is one of the most precious gifts bestowed by heaven on man. No treasures that the earth contains and the sea conceals can compare with it. For freedom, as for honor, men can and should risk their lives, and in contrast, captivity is the worst evil that can befall them. Wow, this book, I can't believe that I finished it. It's just unbelievable that this was written in 1605, 1615. Sometimes it's hard to understand if this was a true story or a story that was made up, because the author really talks to us and the characters in a way also talk to us, and they are curious, and there's talk about how they found out that a book has been written about them, and then they ask all these questions like, oh, how did the author portray me, and just stuff like that. And the author also really kind of talks about him finding information for this book from some kind of Arabic texts, which is interesting. But anyway, this is a story about a character named Alonso Quijano, who actually throughout this book calls himself Don Quixote or Don Quixote de la Mancha, and about a guy named Sancho Panza. Don Quixote is this character that could either be considered like a little cuckoo in his head, or as a person who has, I guess, figured out the secret to happy life, because he loves books about chivalry and knights, and he decides to become a knight-errant himself. So he kind of decides to live in his perfect world, in his fantasy world. And by the way, he is 50 years old, so that's quite special. He decides to live in his fantasy world as a knight, and he sees adventures and beauty in everything, which is really, really wonderful, even if other people tell him that, oh, he's a madman and he should go home and he should just stop playing around. He is still confident in what he's doing. So I guess you could also say that he has figured life out. The other character, Sancho Panza, is Don Quixote's squire, and Sancho lives in a different world than Don Quixote. Don Quixote is out for the beauty and the adventures, while Sancho Panza agreed to become Don Quixote's squire because Don Quixote promised that he will give Sancho an island so that Sancho can become a governor. And that is Sancho's dream. Sancho kind of sees the world as it is. As an example, windmills don't turn into some kind of adventurous giant thingies. They are just windmills, and a flock of sheep is just a flock of sheep, and so on. But he just goes with all of that stuff because he wants to be a governor. And in the end of the second book, both Sancho and Don Quixote actually kind of get to really experience their dreams, and then Sancho decides that he wouldn't make a good governor, and Don Quixote is kind of forced to go back to his village and stop being a knight for a year. So he decides to become a shepherd instead. But then unfortunately he dies of fever. So that was Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, and it was a very interesting read. Of course, it might get a little boring if you're trying to really read it in a short period of time, because most of the story is quite repetitive, just adventures, and Don Quixote really getting himself into trouble, and Sancho really just being the bystander. But I do recommend reading this book because it's just incredible that this book was written in the 1600s. I do think that maybe it's better to read this book in Spanish for people who speak Spanish and have grown up in that kind of culture, because maybe the funny parts in this book are easier to understand for people who kind of are used to that kind of humor and stuff like that. But that was all, and my wrist hurts from holding that book. I've got a line. Okay, anyway, that is the sign that it's time to end this video. Thank you for watching, and bye bye!